to episode 395 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Jess,
Andrew Swafford,
Michael O'Malley.
And in today's episode, we'll be talking about movies that we saw this week in part one. And in part two, we're going to be digging into our YouTube video essay series.
There's not a great... This series doesn't have a great title at present.
It had an amazing... In its very, very early stages, it had a very amazing title, which was the Cahiers du Internet, right?
Cahiers du Internet. Yeah. We could go with that. I don't know. I've been calling it YouTube documentaries or left tube documentaries. But really just nonfiction video essays that are a little bit more artistic than the average YouTube video is the main topic of our series.
Let's stick with that. That's a great title.
Yeah.
Next series, YouTube video essays that are a little bit more artistic than a normal video essay. All right. But we'll be getting into that into part two. But let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. We got a bunch of newbies. We got a bunch of new releases. So let's start with those. Andrew and Michael, why don't you all talk about your day?
Oh man, our day has been completely consumed by Jeen-Yuhs, which is the 3-part documentary about Kanye West that was put on Netflix over the course of 3 weeks in kind of like these episodic installments. It is by a guy named Cootie Simmons, and his
last name. I never knew his last name.
They never say his last name in the movie. They only refer to him as Cootie. He also has a creative partner who I think does mostly post-production stuff called Chike Oza. But Cootie is kind of like the central voice of the documentary, and
literal voice. He narrates,
and like it opens with him kind of talking about like, here's how I got the idea for the documentary. Like in any sort of documentary, the presence of the director and like the relationship between the director and their subject is a pretty important factor. And like Cootie puts himself like front and center, and by the end of it, this is a 5.5 hour documentary, by the way. By the end of it, it is much more of a documentary about Cootie's relationship with Kanye West than it is about Kanye West.
He basically knew Kanye as a teen and like grew up with him in Chicago. So it's not sometimes it feels like a weird sort of vanity, like ego thing when documentary directors put themselves in the movies. But in this one, I think it is like 100% justified, and it would have felt weird had he not, honestly.
Yes. I was wanting a different kind of documentary from this, but I am ultimately glad that he decided to take the angle that he took, because like he has all this footage just like him hanging out with Kanye West, and to try to make it into like this sprawling found footage documentary of like every single drama that Kanye West has found himself embroiled in over the last 20 years. It's just like too much to contain in a documentary, even a 5.5 hour, even a 7.5 hour documentary. But, capturing his relationship with Kanye is much more manageable. And it gives the whole thing kind of a very small scale, intimate feel, even though it's like spanning all this time and it's such a long documentary. It's being shot largely on cameras from the early 2000s. And like it looks like somebody's home videos. Like this doesn't feel like a corporate product in the same way that like, and I liked this movie, and I know you did too, Michael, like the Taylor Swift documentary that Netflix put out a couple years ago did. Like this feels like a personal passion project.
Right, because like the idea to make a documentary about Kanye West, like he, at least as the documentary positions it, and all the footage backs this up, is that like he saw Kanye West and he knew that Kanye West had an intention to have a music career. Mm-hmm. And so he decided to just start filming Kanye West with the assumption that Kanye was going to get into the music biz, and therefore he would be documenting it in real time.
He said it was inspired by Hoop Dreams. Like he says that directly in the documentary, and like Kanye's a guy with a dream. Let's see where the dream takes him. And he thought that like Kanye winning Album of the Year at the Grammys for The College Dropout would be like the end of the story. But of course, that is like barely the beginning of the Kanye West story.
I will say that like so the documentary is in 3 parts, and the first 2 parts all lead up to that. Like part 2 ends with the release of The College Dropout and all the acclaim that he gets, and he says that he wanted to end the movie there, and Kanye was the one who said, no, I don't really want people to know that intimate a version of myself yet. Like, I'm still trying to figure out the persona that I'm going to be playing on the public stage. And I think that probably there's like a good, like if you just cut the movie off there, it's a good behind the scenes, like kind of from the roots up into like mainstream commercial success story of Kanye West. And part 3 is really a lot different, more so than the other parts. It's mixing together like news clips and mixing together like, social media and that sort of stuff that like we're all familiar with interacting with Kanye with now, and it is much more distance from him. And that's like the kind of point, right? Is like in the course of his relationship with Kanye West is being very close to him until he hits like that. He kind of gets over the hump into like, A-list stardom, and at which point he's unable to keep up with Kanye West and they become distant. And then he reconnects with him intermittently, like in like 2014 onward. And so the last part is very fractured and not nearly as like home video-esque, and is more collage-like, honestly, than the other 2 parts. So it definitely feels like he had a complete movie made, and then he made this as almost like not an epilogue because it's still a third of the movie, but there's a real change in format and tone following the first 2 parts.
While we were watching it, we were talking about how like must be so frustrating to make a documentary about Kanye West because like the events that feel relevant and feel worth including just like keep happening,
Right. There's multiple parts in which he says, and I thought that would be the end. And then like it would be like presenting Kanye's 2020 presidential run, or presenting Kanye's like like a conversion to Christianity, like evangelical Christianity or whatever.
And ultimately, that part about like how it handles Kanye's evangelicalism is probably where the movie falters the most for me. Because Kuti, the director, is also like a very religious person, and as somebody who's like a friend of Kanye West and looks up to Kanye West, and also like ostensibly shares Kanye West's religious beliefs, not really knowing the intricacies of why he believes what he believes or whatever. I think he views Kanye West's like recent religiosity through like the most charitable lens possible, and like he completely kind of ignores the whole like prosperity gospel stuff that Kanye is preaching on Jesus is King, and like the way in which his religious conversion kind of like lines up with like conservative, like the religious right, evangelical Christianity in America, and like how it dovetails with like his embrace of Donald Trump in 2016 onward, and like for Kuti, it's just like, well, Kanye, he's always been a religious guy. He made Jesus walks, and he strayed from the path, but now he's back to Jesus, and we're happy about that. And like,
he seems mostly concerned about Kanye's well-being, like as a friend, and he views like his re-embrace of Christianity as like a stabilizing force, which I'm okay with it not being a critique of everything about like modern Kanye, because like for one, like we've seen that ad nauseum. There are so many critiques of Kanye West recently out there that you can engage with, and 2, like I think it feels sincere, like the point of and of a piece with the point of view of the documentary, which is viewing Kanye's trajectory through a tragic light. There's like a recurring motif of this like giant metaphor, and how like the giant is too big to understand himself, basically. And like I think like there is a sense of tragedy with this arc, but the tragedy is uninterested, I think, in viewing it in the lens of like the larger socio-political implications of it. And I think that that's I think that's mostly fine because like Kanye himself and a lot of other people have already done that. And the thing that's unique and special about this documentary is that it has taken someone like Kanye West, who is so larger than life, and has managed to humanize him in a way that we've not seen before, because we've not seen him having a close friendship with someone in the public sphere, because this isn't public. Like this is like private, you know. We see him do things that he has mythologized, you know, in the past, like, you know, walking into people's, you know, into like a record label and just playing his tracks for, you know, hapless executives or whatever. And you know, he's talked about that before, but to see it play out, you know, you see the real energy of it, and there's a sort of sweetness to it as well, because he's with his friends. Like these are like his people that he's been with, and part of him promoting his music is also promoting the community in which he came from. And there's a real sense of like camaraderie in those like, you know, early years.
Well, there's a big emphasis placed on like the fact that Kanye is a rapper from Chicago, and like there haven't been that many famous rappers from Chicago. They name drop Common as like the only guy before Kanye who really made it big, because, you know, you think of rap stars as coming from like New York, LA, Atlanta, Memphis, and that's it. And so like he's very plugged into the Chicago community and like has all these collaborators on his first project. And then like once he gets sort of rocketed into the stratosphere, it's just kind of the Kanye West show. And like some of the most tragic parts of the documentary are like him interacting with people who used to be part of his life, especially Cootie, and him just being like feeling completely out of touch with it. Like there's this scene where he calls Cootie the wrong name like 3 times.
And it's like the album, is it like the album release party for graduation or something like that? And like Kanye eventually pivots it into like a kind of sort of joke, but like you can see that like Cootie really is visibly hurt, and like there's a lot of stuff like that where in a way like similar to Hoop Dreams, where, you know, there's like the undercurrents of like the sociopolitical like implications of some of this stuff, but the emotional crux of Hoop Dreams is the way in which like the trajectory of the career of those players changes their dynamics within their communities, or changes who they're around in ways that are probably not always healthy. And you see that with Kanye West a lot in this, and like I really liked it. I thought it was like really honestly moving, and it's the sort of movie that has a lot of weight simply by coming out now. Like if this had come out in 2004, 2005, you know, I think it would have been if not forgotten, then like a curiosity, right? But to go back and see Kanye West in like the year 2001 or something like that now, and to see like where he is, like there is inevitably the modern day Kanye baggage you're bringing into that, and that is like a dynamic that this movie, I think, really plumbs like interesting emotional depths with, intentionally or unintentionally. So like that's like an unescapable context of this movie, and to watch him interacting with his mother or his friends or things like that, it's like sweet, and it's so sad how sweet it is, because you know that that's going to be lost at some point.
And another point in this is that like the Kanye that we see in the public eye now, who is so like grating in so many ways, is kind of who he always has been, right? Like you see that kind of like narcissistic personally. There's like very, very early interviews.
There's some great quotes related to that. Like there's a whole riff he has about like, people talk about overconfidence like it's a bad thing, but what's so bad about overconfidence?
There's no such thing as being too confident. And like, meanwhile, later on in the movie, he has like Kurosawa's Throne of Blood playing in the background, and like while he's in the studio, he also has There Will Be Blood by Paul Thomas Anderson, which apparently is his favorite movie, tied with Akira. And like, I just want to know how Kanye interprets There Will Be Blood and Throne of Blood.
It's like Donald Trump's favorite movie is Citizen Kane.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I agree with you. I think that it's like a really like fascinating watch, and I do like the really small scale, intimate angle that it's able to take. Though I do still like far off in the future, maybe once Kanye West is like not making music anymore at all, I do want the kind of like bird's eye view, omniscient, even longer documentary of like chronicling all the like intersectional like complexities of Kanye West's career. Like whenever I watched OJ Made in America several years back, like my knee-jerk reaction that was like, I want a documentary just like this but about Kanye West, because of the way that his career kind of like is like I guess
it's similarly fraught with like really tough, complex, knotty issues of race and class and that sort of thing,
and celebrity and like the media and all these things. So he didn't kill anybody yet. He might kill Pete Davidson, we don't know. But yeah, I do want that documentary in the future, but this documentary, for what it is really interesting. So if it is interesting to you, dear listener, it is on Netflix for you.
But it's in 3 parts, and each part is just an hour and a half, so...
They also feel kind of like TV show episodes. They have kind of like a next week on Kanye West at the end.
Right, which it's worth mentioning, these were released a week apart from one another. Yeah. Like, they were meant... Netflix released them in a way that indicated that you were supposed to watch them episodically rather than like mainlining them like Andrew and I did.
I am currently feeling pretty exhausted with Kanye. Like, I spent my whole day with Kanye and I'm like, I need some time away from Kanye.
It's enough time with Kanye, I would say.
Like, me and Andrew, we've not really hung out much today.
Because I've been watching Kanye West. Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly Kanye.
He did most of the talking.
Jeen-Yuhs on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. JEEN-YUHS, which there's no reason to spell it that way. Like, nobody says it that way in the movie except this Japanese pop artist who they like just caption him saying it with that spelling. There's no reason to.
It looks like a pair of shoes. That's what I think of.
Well,
Jeen-Yuhs on Netflix.
It's not irrelevant to Kanye.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, moving on to other new movies about prominent pop culture figures. I mean, really great transitions.
The Batman.
Can we like share a moment of like chuckling about the in front of Batman? Like, I think that honestly that is one of the funniest things about this movie is the Batman.
There's already been a Batman animated series called The Batman.
Wait, really?
Yeah. I also think that there's probably
that would be funny too.
I think there's a comic series that is The Batman too, but I'm not sure.
It's never not funny though, because like in the first Christopher Nolan movie, in Batman Begins, the Scarecrow always calls him the Batman, and I always thought that was very funny as well. Like, I don't know why it's so funny, but it is extremely funny to me. Like, you don't call it the Spider-Man or the Superman. Like, why is it the Batman?
There is kind of an angle in this movie where like Robert Pattinson, who plays Batman, often talks about like the Batman as if it's like a project, as opposed to like a person or a persona that he embodies. Like, maybe it's time to give up on the Batman.
Yeah, and that was all very... Anytime he said something... Anytime he was reading out of his diary, which he's literally like Diary of a Country Priest like style, like brooding in the diary here. Like, I always thought those were very funny. I thought this movie was actually pretty funny, to be honest.
I thought that it was... I have two conflicting opinions on this movie. One is that it actually looks very nice, I think, for the most part, like, especially compared to what Marvel tends to do aesthetically with their superhero movies. Like, those all just look like TV shows, right? I think that they committed to an aesthetic, and it is like that grim, dark aesthetic that we're probably sick of by now with superhero movies.
That's well done, though.
And
it looks better than the Nolan movies.
It does look better than Nolan movies. And there's some really well shot action as well. Like when people punch each other, you actually see the punches connect. It's not just like really frenetic and cheating editing.
There's also that fight scene with the gunshots illuminating the fight.
Oh my God,
that was
so
very
good.
cool.
Yeah. On the other hand, it is like unconscionably long. Like it is way too long. And like I know that most movies that get put out by Hollywood are like a little too long, but this movie is like an hour too long. There is no reason for it to be a full 3 hours, and the story that it tells is not interesting enough to like pull me through 3 hours of it. So I was like coasting on the vibes and the aesthetics and the filmmaking of it for like an hour and a half. And after we got that past that point and all that novelty had worn off, I was just waiting for this thing to be over. Also kind of politically incoherent too, which I know you wrote about a little bit in your Letterboxd review, Michael. But
I did. Jesse, did you see this? No.
She did not.
Just the dudes talking about Batman.
Dudes talking about Batman. We're gonna rise the Batman.
The Batman.
We're gonna rise the Apple Podcast rankings with this one.
Yeah. Batman, Kanye. Can we like throw in like I don't know what like
What else is popular right now?
I don't know.
Five Nights at Freddy's. Let's talk about Five Nights at Freddy's.
Sorry, I gotta rope in all my students in one go here.
Speaking of students, I do have a student who has seen this movie like I think at this point probably 5 times.
Holy crap, that's 15 hours of their life.
Yeah, he said that it's his favorite movie of all time. And it's a movie that I can imagine like any like teenage boy who's vaguely interested in movies going to see and like thinking like, "Oh my god, this is the greatest movie ever made." Because it does look, it's like catering to that audience specifically, but it looks artsier than it maybe actually is. And so like you're watching it thinking like, oh, this is a serious, deep, profound experience that I'm having.
I want to make a case for it being a very funny movie though.
It is
because
funny.
it is funny. Like I was caught off guard by how funny it is. Cause like, okay, so I've not seen the like Zack Snyder adjacent like Batman. So my most recent Batman thing would be the Christopher Nolan.
There's also not like a Batman movie. There's only Batman in team-up movies.
That's true. So my nearest reference is the Christopher Nolan movies, which have humor in them, but the humor is usually like little dialogue stingers or things like that. There's the pencil making the pencil disappear part.
It's very British. It's like you smirk. You know.
Yeah, so I'm not going to say that the Christopher Nolan movies are mirthless because they're not. But this movie does things that I think I was just chuckling. Like the Batmobile shows up and it's like the Batmobile from the animated series where there's like a flame coming out of the back.
Yeah.
And then there's also this part where they have the Penguin in handcuffs. The Penguin played by Colin Farrell, who's actually really great.
I love Colin Farrell in that movie so
hilarious.
much.
He is hilarious. He's so funny in this movie.
The Batman, he's over here in my club.
There's the part where the Commissioner Gordon shows him the picture of like a mutilated cop or something like that. He's been mutilated by the Joker, and the guy's like, "Hey, that's too rough, man." Like, it's so funny.
Hey, will you show me that there, copper?
This is the part where they have him handcuffed. His feet are handcuffed. His hands are handcuffed. He's waddling like a penguin across the shot. Like
he's also genuinely unrecognizable. Like I went in knowing it was Colin Farrell in like heavy prosthetics, and I still couldn't see Colin Farrell's face.
The penguin,
He's
the gangster.
Penguin.
The gangster.
Yeah.
Hey,
the new one.
The Batman.
the Batman.
There's
the Batman.
There's also, I also thought this was funny, maybe unintentionally so, but there's like a whole motif built around this Nirvana song, which every time it played, I was just like...
Well, it only plays twice. I want to defend the movie on this charge specifically.
I don't think it's not bad. It's not bad, but it's funny.
It's used twice, and it's used to bookend the movie. Once at the very beginning, once at the very end.
The Nirvana song, as a recording of Kurt Cobain, is used twice. Yeah. However, the score in between is constantly using the like riff, like the central riff in that.
I was annoyed by the score, and people have said like it's Michael Giacchino's score. I've heard a lot of people saying they think it's like one of his best scores. I thought it was obnoxiously repetitive, but I didn't actually hear the Nirvana melody in there. I heard the Imperial March from Star Wars. It sounded like Darth Vader.
The Nirvana melody is just like a fifth step down, right? Isn't it like?
I guess so. Yeah.
Like that's playing throughout the movie, and I thought it was so funny. It was like this whole score is a Nirvana song. Anyway,
the whole movie's
Nirvana
fucking hilarious.
Yeah,
it's so funny.
There's parts too, and I know that there was some like pre-release hype about this, but he'll take off his helmet and he's still got the like eyeliner on. He looks like he's from The Cure or something.
Oh, that's what the TikTok people have been making fun of. Like, you know, the bat signal goes up and he like runs into a room and just starts like putting on like mascara and then he runs out. No, the funniest part is when he is escaping that police. The police station and just jumps off that thing and then just hits a bridge and then just falls. Fucking hilarious.
Yeah. He falls a lot in this movie. Like, he's always tripping.
Like, during the marketing and lead up to this movie, was that it was going to be, like, weirdly horny or sexual?
There's kind of a sexual chemistry between Robert Pattinson and Zoe Kravitz, who plays Catwoman.
They kiss once.
It's really not as pronounced as I was led to believe it would be.
If you want to see the real horny Batman Catwoman, you got to go watch Batman Returns. Like, I was led to believe it was something on that level, and I was disappointed on that.
What's the superhero movie that had the controversy about?
Yeah, but like the
not
thing
wanting them to like.
Well, the thing I'll give this movie is at least.
What was your question, Jess?
What's the movie that had controversy because they didn't want to have sex? That's every Marvel movie.
No, it was like
nobody in a Marvel movie.
Specifically, the superhero. There was like maybe they were gonna try to make the superhero like eat out a girl or something.
Oh, this was it was one of the Zack Snyder movies because like I don't remember where this came from, but like. Zack Snyder had to clarify that in his movies, canonically, Batman eats pussy.
Wait, does that come up in the movie?
That came up, well, like, it came up in the discourse around the movie, and Zack Snyder ended up painting a picture
of
Batman going down on Catwoman.
I will say in this movie, Robert Pattinson 100% does not only does he not know that, or not do that, he doesn't know how to do that. Like, I think that's probably canonically in this movie. Like, has he had sex? Debatable. Like, it's not even clear if he has friends who aren't Alfred.
Yeah.
He feels like such a weird choice for Batman. Like,
he's good.
I thought he did a good job.
I don't know, for the role, I guess, period. Batman. Like, he's such a... He used to be like the hunky dude, I guess, or maybe people thought of him as that, but not even really. Like it's not like he got the hot boy roles like Channing Tatum or something. But he's just become like Willem Dafoe or something, but like I guess a little bit cuter than Willem.
I think that's the intent here. Like he's supposed to be like off-putting. Like he's supposed to be like, were he to be the traditional Bruce Wayne like playboy bachelor, like he would be very like hot. But he's refusing to embody that role. Like it's kind of like the text of the movie is he's refusing to embody that role, and so he's like grimy and gross looking all the time. Like he like comes in from having been doing Batman stuff all night, and he's just like sweaty and sleep deprived, and his eyes are all red. Like that's kind of like what's going on. Yeah, the mascara is cool though. I like that. It's just the sweatiness is just.
Yeah. You know, so I thought Robert Pattinson did a good job. You know who I did not think did a good job is Paul Dano as the Riddler.
I didn't even know that was Paul Dano, and he took off the mask, and I thought...
I knew it was Paul Dano, and I thought he was fine when he had the mask on, though there were definitely things that were laughable about the performance, like maybe intentionally so. But once the mask was off, and like when he has that interrogation scene with Batman, like that didn't work.
That was a misstep. I think once the Riddler takes off his mask, which is maybe like 45 minutes from the end of the movie, like the movie just nosedives in quality. But that scene is bad for a number of reasons. One is Paul Dano is like really off the walls in a way that's not like productive. But two, it's like directly interacting with your memories of that same scene that's with the Joker and Batman, and like it's not doing anything interesting with that. Like it's almost just like mimicking that scene in a way, because Riddler makes the same basic point of like, we're not so different, you and I.
Yeah.
And
which was really funny because I just rewatched Austin Powers and it felt like the same thing. It was great. Mr. Powers, we're not so different, you and I.
And there's like this thing that the movie completely drops the ball on, because it's an interesting idea on paper, but it's not done a lot with, is that like the Riddler is inspired by Batman. It's not just that he's like Batman's polar opposite, like, you know, like a yin has a yang. Like, he's like, the Batman is the reason the Riddler exists, because the Riddler was inspired to do the things that he did because of Batman. And that's like mentioned in that scene, but then not a lot happens with that afterwards, except Batman's like, I realized that I can't just be punching people. I gotta save some people too. But then by the end of the movie, he's still punching people. So I don't really understand like what lesson he learned.
There's like this thematic arc to the movie that it kind of sets up and doesn't really pay off. Like the idea that like vigilante justice doesn't actually solve problems,
but
right?
you know what does solve problems is the U.S. military coming and instituting martial law over your city to get all the looters, which is like, how this movie ends.
The way that I guess the Riddler is inspired by Batman is that, like, you know, if the legal system is corrupt, you know, somebody's got to step in and fix it. And like the Riddler is this guy who's like suffered from, you know, the lack of like social welfare system. He grew up in an orphanage, and like the great like wealth disparity in Gotham has like made him and many people like him suffer for a long time. So he's like trying to take that system into his own hands, and like it's kind of trying to do a similar thing with class that Joker did a couple years ago, but it, like I said at the beginning of like my take, is that it ends up being like pretty politically incoherent, and the idea that like Batman needs to do something other than vigilante justice, like, you know, using his billions of dollars for philanthropic work or something, just kind of gets hand waved away, and the Riddler kind of becomes this like QAnon 4chan mass shooter figure who doesn't like have a consistent political ethos.
Yeah. The climax of the movie and the ending was just, that's bad. Like that's sort of the movie tips over from like being kind of goofy and fun while also being grim to then just being like, that's where you start really feeling the length. That's where I started feeling the length, is like once you see it reaching this climax, and it's a very conventional climax in terms of like superhero climaxes. It's also a climax that, like Andrew said, doesn't really do anything interesting with the ideas that have already been laid out by the movie. And it's just, I found it pretty tedious at that point.
It's 3 hours.
It's 3 hours.
It's 3 hours.
It's really good for 2 of those 3 hours, though. I'll go to bat for that.
The Batman, it's in theaters. It's made a bunch of money. Go see it or don't, whatever. I'm not gonna promote it. It's done its job. Jess, I want you to talk, so I'm gonna skip my movie and go to you.
What? That's wow. You don't got to talk either, Zach.
Yeah, well,
He talked about Colin Farrell being the Penguin.
yeah, I got to talk about Colin Farrell being the Penguin.
All right. Well, folks, it is finally time for me to revisit The Love Witch. If you haven't seen it, directed by Anna Biller.
You say that like we've been like anticipating it. Like people have been
We've
like
got
talking.
letters every week about
People have been asking,
People
Jess,
have been writing
when are you
in.
going to rewatch The Love Witch? I said, not yet. Wait, be patient, my child. Anyway,
Just the person.
so I did. I've been hanging out with a friend lately who's kind of into the metaphysical side of things.
I wasn't sure how you were going to finish that sentence, because there's a lot of things in that movie you could be into.
She's, I guess she identifies as pagan, a friend of mine, and so I was like, hey, you know, I've been kind of wanting to rewatch this movie. Like, let me show you. I don't know for sure that, I don't know how you're going to take it. But anyway, The Love Witch, so good. I don't know what I thought of when I first watched it, and I think I still maintain some of the feelings that I had the first time I watched it, which is that, like, first of all, I guess movies that are ever about like witches or vampires, sometimes I just want to see them not be evil. Sometimes I just want to see them like just having a good time and having a good life. You don't really get to have that with The Love Witch. She's not like a swell gal. She's not doing good deeds in the world. But she looks so cool. Like, that's what's really great about The Love Witch is it's this like 60s sexploitation movie, only it was made in 2016. But everything about it is just so vibrant, so like alive. You feel like you can like almost smell it or touch it. Like, it's such a sensory experience. The movie you're watching, it just feels like velvet. It feels like you're really, really immersed in this world, even though it's just, made not too long ago. And it's got like that 60s sexploitation feel of like, it's like an overtly sexually charged movie, very horny, but also like the characters are kind of gross too. So you don't even feel super great about any of the love pairings because something sinister is like going on, but also they're like, here's a boob. Like, we know you came to see the boob, just like with this exploitation. Like, it really feels like it, was made in that time. And I think she just does such a great job of capturing that era. But on top of that, there's just so many really cool effects. Like, one of the first men that, what is the witch's name? Elaine sees, she gives him this like she makes love potion. I think she tries like 3 or 4 different times in the movie to like perfect her recipe on love potion, but she kind of keeps smoking it up and like murdering dudes and then getting in all like self-denial in her head about it. It's really cool. So she gives this man her love potion, and it has toxic psychedelic drugs in it. But before he knows that he's going to die, he's really, really mesmerized and wrapped up in this experience of like, a sexual relationship with her. And it shows her as she's like starting to undress. She has this dress on, or she has this overcoat on, and it is the most amazing outfit I've ever seen because it's like an all black coat, but then she opens it and it's got this almost pastel rainbow inside. So she like opens her coat, and then in the meantime, you like as a viewer, it almost looks like you put on one of those like rainbow spectral glasses, and you're seeing what the man is seeing as he's like, and dealing with this like psychedelic effects. And so you see like these rainbow effects like spinning in multiple spots on the camera, as well as her with this, I don't know, just everything about it is just so polished and stylish that it's just a really, really fun movie to watch. And it just goes all over the place. Kind of reminds me, like I said, of a sexploitation movie, but also of Donkey Skin a little bit. There's this sequence later in the movie where she and this guy that she's seeing go horseback riding, and then randomly they just encounter like a Renaissance fair in the woods, but the twist is that they're all people in her coven, and she doesn't reveal that to him. And they're all dressed like tarot card characters, but like the way that scene played out, and there's like singing, and they're all in these medieval costumes, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like the bizarreness of it almost reminded me of Donkey Skin. That is a
direct inspiration, by the way. Anna Biller did a video for Criterion talking about how much she likes Donkey Skin.
Yeah, so it's such a neat movie. And ultimately, sexploitation movies kind of leave me feeling sort of weird, as if I'm not really sure what the directors are trying to get me to feel. Like, I don't know what the directors want me to feel about. Well, yeah, but then
they usually try to like punish you for feeling horny.
Right. They show like sexually charged imagery, but like interspersed with stuff that almost makes you feel like guilty or shitty about it. Like, that this guy's getting drugged and is going to die, or I don't know. Like they'll have like certain voiceovers like over the sexual scene, or certain sounds that almost like are horrific paired with the sex. So I don't really know what feelings I'm supposed to take away with regards to that. And that's kind of something I always feel when I watch sexploitation movies, where I was like, yeah, like this was hot and groovy to see. And that's true for a lot of those sexploitation but paranormal crossovers, like with the Velvet Vampire that came out, I guess in the 60s or 70s. I'm not sure when that came out. Or I feel like there's like several other examples that I'm not thinking off the top of my head.
Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is a good example.
Yeah. And I don't ever know what to do with it. Anna Biller also directed Viva, and we watched that a couple of years ago. And I don't know I can't remember if Andrew liked it or not. But I remember
we were both feeling pretty icky about that.
Felt super icky about that one. And that's kind of more about like kind of swinging culture, I guess, but it stars Anna Biller. So I feel like she went on and then did The Love Witch and really kind of perfected her style and like what she's doing there. So ultimately, I don't know how I feel about like her messaging and her politics, but she knows how to make a very, very stylish, compelling movie that just, I don't know. To me, it's all about like the senses, the visuals and the sound and the eroticism. Like it all just is very like palpable almost with her filmmaking. And I just was like mesmerized.
Wasn't she also really heavily involved in the costuming of this movie as well?
Yeah, she made all the costumes.
Yeah,
costumes are phenomenal.
They are phenomenal.
This movie just goes so hard with like not only does Elaine always just dress amazing, no matter what the look is, like every look I want to do myself, but there's also these scenes. There's just so many different pieces. Like she's like this hot goth, almost like Elvira, but then she's like got the vibrant neons and the darks. And then there's this tea room that they go to, her and a friend in the movie, but it's like a Victorian tea room and just everything about it. All the costumes are so elaborate and they've got like somebody playing on harp. The whole movie, it's just got so many neat things. Like it feels like you're watching her sexploitation and then it's almost like a fairy tale. The way, and they like lean into the fantasy elements of it too, and oh my god, it's so good. I liked it so much better the second time I watched it. I feel like I appreciated just all the stylistic choices of it above all else.
People got what they wanted. Your follow-up reaction.
Yeah, now you guys know. I'm happy to report that I did finally get around to rewatching The Love Witch, and this is what I have to say about it. Everybody's been asking.
Stop sending letters. Stop emailing us.
Stop the letters. But thank you for all those concerned.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick break. And then we're going to talk about something completely different to all these three movies.
Honestly, The Love Witch is not that different from
It's
Contrapoints.
really not, yeah.
Keeping the vibes.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is your favorite Filipino podcaster, Jessica Carr. I'm here to let you know about a couple of things that Cinematary offers that you might not know about. First, if you're a fan of what Cinematary is doing, please consider joining us on Patreon. Remember when we weren't clamoring for your dollars? Well, now we're just clamoring for 5 of your dollars. So please help us and donate to our Patreon, and then you'll get exclusive content from our staff, including our Film Theory and Chill series, where a panel takes a piece of theory each month and deconstructs it before diving into whatever topic is on their mind from the past week. The $5 each month is investment in the website and the podcast, and it goes solely to paying our writers for the reviews each week, so please consider doing it. It's only $5. If you missed an episode of Cinematary or a piece of writing we've had, you should consider signing up for our free newsletter. Each Sunday, we send out a note with the latest podcast episode, piece of Patreon content, and the last 2 reviews that we've written at cinematary.com. It's perfect for those of you who are interested in what's happening, and it makes sure that you don't miss a single Cinematary review. Finally, the easiest thing that you can do to help us is to please give us a rating and review on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever else you're using to listen to the show. This helps us get more eyeballs and ears on the podcast and the website, and it helps the people know about Cinematary, which is really what we're here for. So to recap, consider donating to our Patreon, sign up for the free newsletter, and give us a rating or review. We would really appreciate if you could do these things. Thank you for listening, and now back to the show.
And we're back with part 2 of episode 395 of Cinematary. In this part, we're going to be kicking off our YouTube video essays that are more artsy than a normal video essay.
This gotta go on the website, please.
Oh man.
Yeah. But I'm gonna hand the keys over to Andrew. Andrew, take it over.
Yeah, I don't have like a info sheet as Zach often comes to part twos of these. Yeah, I don't have any of that either. But you know, I just wanted to give a brief overview kind of off the top of my head of like what the idea for this series is, and also give people a brief introduction to the creator that we're going to talk about today, Contrapoints. So, you know, this series is called
Can I admit that I thought her name was Contrapoints?
It's not, but I understand that impulse.
I mean, I learned after the first video, but I just referred to her as Contrapoints.
Natalie Wynn, the filmmaker / video essayist we're talking about today. So Michael and I have kind of been kicking this idea around for a couple of years now, of like spending some time talking about, you know, artistically ambitious YouTube videos, and particularly like YouTube video essays, which is generally what we tend to watch on the platform. And that realm, that side of things on YouTube has gotten very ambitious in the past like 5 to 10 years. YouTube was a very like conservative leaning platform around like 2014 when Gamergate happened, and there's been a big influx of creators trying to kind of push back against that since 2014 and then on into the Trump administration. And there's been this loose community of creators that have kind of emerged that some people refer to as left tube, some people refer to as bread tube, though the creators who work in this community don't necessarily like the labels and don't necessarily think of themselves as a community. Regardless, there's definitely been like a particular cinematic style that has sort of emerged over the years. It's almost like a genre that you can work in, like this particular type of YouTube video essay. And that style has been largely codified by the director we're talking about today, or the filmmaker / video essayist we're talking about today, Natalie Wynn, Contrapoints. It's a little hard to explain what she does, but it's like very aesthetically unified. Like she has this particular look that her videos all have. It is, you know, strongly kind of infused with like neon lights and like really elaborate costumes and these characters that she's constructed as kind of mouthpieces for different political perspectives. And I have chosen 5, or I guess me and Michael and a couple other people that I've talked to have kind of like curated a handful of videos that we've sort of selected as like an intro to Contrapoints that we're going to be talking about on the show today. And those videos are, if you've not like gotten links to them from the Cinematary site already, the first one is called The Left. The second one's called Tiffany Tumbles. The third one is called Incels. The fourth is called The Apocalypse. And the final one is called Gender Critical. And all of these videos together comprise about 2 hours of watching time. So about the same amount of time you might spend watching a movie any given week. But this kind of spans a pretty broad swath of her career. And if you kind of see her working in some different styles, the main thing for me in kind of like tracing her evolution as a creator is that in these first 2 early videos, The Left and Tiffany Tumbles, they're kind of presented as dialogues between characters. She was a philosophy grad student before she quit university or quit grad school to become a YouTuber. And these are kind of like framed as these Socratic dialogues between characters who there's not necessarily a character who has like the right opinion. They're just kind of like batting ideas off of each other, and you can kind of tell like who she's siding with more than the other, but you can definitely see like her perspective in multiple characters. And like the dialogues is something that she's sort of moved away from as a creator in recent years for reasons that we can maybe get into later. But her videos, the last 3 videos in the lineup here are more like, your typical like talking head video essayist speaking directly to the camera, though she does utilize costumes and characters to kind of like have these different perspectives represented, though not necessarily in as theatrical of a way as you see in the dialogue videos. So that's kind of like my general intro to like Left Tube and Contrapoints. I think that I know that me, Michael, and Jessy are all big fans of what she does and have been for a long time. So I'm excited to talk about her with you guys, but I'm also excited to hear from you, Zach, who I think you have never like encountered her work before. Is that right?
I thought her name was Contrapoints at the beginning, so that tells you. Oh, is it me?
I mean, sure, we can start with you.
Yeah.
What was your first impression of Natalie Wynn / Contrapoints?
Lot of strong theater kid energy, which I didn't like.
It's very camp. It's like very John Watersy. Like if you've ever watched a John Waters movie, a lot of her personas are similar.
No, it's like a theater kid. Like she's clearly very infatuated with her characters and herself, which it's fine. Do I want to like engage with that? No.
What do you think of like the ideas?
Oh, those are fine. I mean, do I sit and stew on those for long periods of time? Not really. Do I disagree with them? No. Do I feel like people like Contrapoints herself, is better suited to, think about and talk about them? Sure. Because I don't really want to.
I'm enjoying this Socratic dialogue with yourself right now.
Yeah. So that's, they were fine. Do I disagree with them? Again, no. It's just, they're just ideas. It's YouTube,
I mean, I'm going to defend my series here for a second, Zach. I think that, to use the parlance of the first half of this podcast, these are much more artistically ambitious videos than I feel like most like info dump explainer YouTube videos participate in. Right?
One thing you didn't mention is that the two kind of YouTube subcultures that a lot of these videos come out of are, on the one hand, atheist debunker videos, where they would be like dunking on creationists or whatever, and the other half being like the PBS style, like idea channel, like educational YouTube. And so this is kind of like melding the two together in some ways.
Yeah, I get that. I just don't watch that stuff on YouTube. Like, for instance, the last YouTube video before these that I watched was this mare that was going to be mounted by a stallion, and she kicked the stallion in the head and immediately killed him. And it was,
oh my God,
it was crazy.
Wait, the mare kicked the stallion?
Yeah. And the stallion like had like this boner and he was like ready to fuck. And then like the mare like back kicked him and it just hit him in the head and he just falls over. And these Mexican farmers are just losing their minds.
Please link that.
Okay. I'll go find it. So that's the shit I watch on YouTube. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is kind of a tough sell, for like most people with regards to like how they consume YouTube, because I think a lot of people don't like. We've tried to talk to our friends about like Contrapoints who don't watch it, and they're kind of like, yeah, I mean, sounds neat. I don't know. I want to spend like an hour and a half watching a YouTube video, because it's like kind of a mentality shift thing. Like, I don't. Yeah, like I feel like a lot of people just view YouTube either for like music videos or maybe like a quick news thing, or I don't know, some like more kind of casual fun consumption, or maybe sometimes I use YouTube like listening to sound playlists and stuff at work. So if that's kind of somebody's consumption of YouTube, this is kind of a very different thing. And I think like for me and Andrew, we're really big Contra fans, and so when she drops a new video, like that's what we're doing that night. We're watching that hour and a half long Contrapoints video that night, buckling down, turning on our like vibe lights and chilling with Natalie. But also, I guess what I think is neat about Contra is that, and maybe, I don't know, maybe I've gotten smarter too, but there are definitely some YouTube philosophers that we follow or used to follow who I like, but I do get lost in what they say. And I won't really know when it's happened, but all of a sudden I realize I've gotten very lost. With Natalie, I feel like she, I don't know, delivers it in just as simple enough, but to where like I can follow and not get too lost in it. But it's also super entertaining. To me, the characters that she plays, like most of them, have some really like decent points, but none of them are like wholly correct or wholly, you know, making like a completely good faith argument. And there's all like faults for each one of them. I mean, except for like when she plays Nazis, like literal Nazis, then, you know, I don't think you're supposed to side with like anything that they're saying. But I think she also is really good at playing exactly how they communicate, which you'll see. Like, you know, are we doing what's that guy? The series, the debunker, the alt-right playbook.
Alt-right playbook. We are gonna watch an alt-right playbook video as part of next week's podcast. Yeah.
I feel like I like appreciate some of Natalie's characters and the rhetoric stuff that she breaks down a lot more, having watched the alt-right playbook series too. So we'll talk about that later when we get to that series.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think she does such a great job of like picking through talking points and helping you understand like the nuances of the concepts that she's sharing. And she does it really in an entertaining way. And, you know, like she herself is a trans woman, and, you know, so she really likes to like really go over the top with like the drag style, like makeup and hair. And to me, like the costuming is just really, really neat. And it is a big part of like just what makes her videos so herself and so unique. And I don't know. I think that she's just like a really playful personality. But it's also kind of hard, and this, maybe we want to talk about it, maybe we don't, to watch some of the videos that we watched in this series, knowing that she herself like has been struggling a lot with substance abuse issues. And so like that is a theme that's really frequent in a lot of her videos, like a character whining and then wanting to drink or something like that, and or making frequent jokes about substance use when she's really been bullied a lot online and had such a tough time. And then I know, like, because I follow her on Instagram too, that there's been a lot of substance abuse stuff going on. Really, it seems like she's had a rough go.
If I can pick up on that a little bit, not specifically the substance abuse things, which I wasn't super aware of, because I'm not on the social medias that a lot of YouTubers are. Yeah. So I'm a lot of times ignorant of that element. But like one of the things that I think makes YouTube documentaries, YouTube essays that are more artistic than your average YouTube videos, I think one of the things that makes them worth talking about on this podcast, which is like a movie podcast, and these would not normally be classified as movies, but there is a very conscious cinematic influence and effort being put forth in these movies. But because they're on YouTube, that different environment creates interesting tensions on the filmmaking that are different from a lot like what you would expect of most filmmakers who are working in, like, let's say documentary format. Because like let's take like this is maybe a bad comparison, but if you think of the closest in like traditional cinema documentary making to what Contrapoints is doing is Michael Moore, right? You know, who's out there like debunking right-wing stuff, like dunking on right-wingers and presenting like kind of left-wing or at least like left adjacent ideas. And Michael Moore is similar to Contrapoints, presenting himself as a character in front of the camera, right? But I think that like the position of YouTube as a mechanism of filmmaking in which there is feedback and there are feedback loops from audiences makes it really interesting to engage with, because, you know, usually when you have a film in a traditional distribution method, it is put out there as an object, like and that object is kind of like sealed away, right? A Michael Moore documentary gets released, and that is it, right? That's what's going to come out on the DVD, whatever people have to say about it, whether critics, you know, savage it or love it, and whatever people's reaction to it is, that it stays the same. But with with YouTube, because it is so integrated with the idea of social media, and because you have the person in front of the camera being also present on social media and also sometimes being able to comment down below, it creates this really interesting tension in which like the work of a YouTuber is not any one video, but the crafting of a channel itself, and the body of work becomes like the meaning of that body of work changes based on like the whole scope of the history of that channel. And you can see that happening in Contrapoints. And if you go on with most of these channels, like one of the things that is really interesting about like LeftTube, but is also like in some levels frustrating to me, is that inevitably any LeftTube channel that gets into this like ecosystem will eventually start making videos about the ecosystem itself, which can become,
has of course done
right, and which is really interesting. Like this is something that like Michael Moore is not out there making videos about Michael Moore.
Or Michael Moore's audiences. But eventually, a lot of these channels end up being really self-reflexive in ways that I think are really interesting and also frustrating, because if you're into the channels for like, let's say the Socratic dialogues, those kind of go away. Yeah. But increasingly, you see this the videos themselves are reacting to past videos and reacting to ways that people have engaged with the videos in the past, and sometimes in like, really fairly serious and rigorous ways. And I think that that's like an interesting dynamic that is not something that you see in traditional cinema, but I think is in the internet age increasingly endemic of internet media. Internet media is inherently self-reflexive because it is positioned within an ecosystem where audiences participate. Yeah, I think that's super interesting.
Because the ecosystem of like filmmaking and film festivals and movie theaters is like the filmmaker monologuing at you, and you don't have a chance to dialogue with them. And that is like the heavy dialogue of the YouTube ecosystem has become a problem for filmmakers or video essayists like Natalie Wynn, because we were talking in the break between part 1 and part 2 about like media literacy being kind of becoming increasingly worse online. And one reason I think that Natalie has shifted away from doing the Socratic dialogues to doing more of a talking head style, like information delivery system video, is that I think people have a really hard time like dealing with those gray areas and dealing with like room to interpret what her perspective actually is across multiple characters, especially because I think that she, this kind of goes back to something you were saying, Jesse, does a really good job at kind of like empathizing with her opposition. Like she is a leftist. She does like strongly disagree with many of the perspectives that are represented in these Socratic dialogues. But she kind of understands how the other side feels, even though she knows they're wrong about some like fundamental factual stuff. And I think that like for a certain kind of audience member on YouTube, like that's not okay, right? Like we want it to be very black and white. We want it to be like, here is the correct thing I want you to take away from this video. And like in her early stuff, especially, I think that she's not necessarily just, delivering polemics. I think she's like making art. And art is like, messy and complicated and ambiguous. And she does, like, again, there is a perspective that she's ultimately like pushing people towards. Like she made her YouTube channel to push people to the left. But she is also dealing with some like really complicated issues that like, I think she understands why people would feel all sorts of ways about.
And not to mention, like, so her channel has been around for many years now, maybe going on a decade. And she has, like, transitioned over the course of her YouTube career entirely in public. And, like, that's like really fucking vulnerable. Like you know what I mean? Like she's had an audience from like basically her adolescence of this experience of her life, and you know has tried to learn and unlearn and relearn like who she is as a person, and you know her thoughts on herself and her concept of herself has changed over time, and I mean that's just like a lot for any one person to deal with. I don't. To me, she's just a really neat person. And it is like a totally different relationship. I feel like than mine with any like filmmaker, capital F filmmaker. Mm-hmm. You know, like I think of like, oh, good, they're making another movie, and then I don't really think about them again until that movie comes out. Versus like, I don't know, I feel like a little more wrapped up in her drama and like and her stories. And maybe that's just because like we view YouTube as kind of its own.
Well, I think one thing that YouTube encourages, which a lot of these creators also talk about, is the idea of like parasocial relationship with the creators. Mm-hmm. And that's like a problematic and fraught topic.
Right.
You know, it's going to be one of the topics of a future episode of this series.
Yeah. And again, like, I think like the integration with social media, which, like I said, I don't really engage with the Twitter and Instagram sort of like elements of this, but like a lot of the videos are responding to things like, that have a context that began outside of like the YouTube ecosystem, but not necessarily in the quote unquote real world, right? It's still like an internet phenomenon that the video is doing. And I think, again, it's like an interesting tension with traditional filmmaking things, which I think that like, these videos definitely are rooted in like certain traditions of theater and certain traditions of cinema. But the thing that makes the YouTube video interesting is that situation, that ecosystem that like encourages this parasocial connection with the character. And like, I mean, this is coming at like, I think these are called video essays, but another thing you could call these, which is like, is a vlog, right? These are vlogs, which is of course like,
the vlogs don't usually deal with like fictional conceits.
I feel like vlogs aren't usually like scripted either. They're just kind of people rambling on a thought.
I mean, it depends on how you want to call it, but like the conceit of I am directly looking at the camera and I am telling you my thoughts, which is like not a minor part of these Contrapoints videos. It has its root in vlogs, which are very confessional, which are very like, you're getting connected to a person, right? I mean, they're video blogs, right?
And some of her stuff is very confessional.
Right. Yeah. And so like, again, like I think that it is drawing from not just cinematic traditions, but also these social media conventions that that make, I think there's like really productive interplay of these in them, just from like a filmmaking standpoint. Like these are just really interesting objects of like what it means to be a person on the internet. Mm-hmm. As in the environment of social media and video communication and audience feedback and all that sort of stuff. And also like as a function of your popularity, I mean, at the beginning of, or if you go earlier in Contrapoints' videos, like those are videos that are one, lower budget, but also two, like where she was not nearly as popular. And by the most recent videos, all of her videos have like nearly 1 million views at least. But the most recent videos they got millions of views immediately, and there's like a very interesting self-awareness about that grows where the audience, the author, like Natalie, and there are other people who work on the writing as well. It's not simply Natalie, but there's a self-awareness about how people will probably react to these things that again is really interesting, and I think you don't really see in traditional cinema because the audience reactions are usually fairly removed from like the actual like ecosystem of film creation, but audiences are invited into the ecosystem.
I think that's one reason why the videos have kind of grown longer and longer. The first couple videos in the playlist that I shared are like 20 minutes, 15 minutes long. And her most recent videos are, 90 minutes plus. And I think that the reason why they need to get longer is because, like Michael was saying, they're like kind of accounting for what the audience reaction to each individual point is going to be. So like
she kind of has to set up counterclaim rebuttal, like 5 layers deep as she's going through her argument. Because again, like misinterpretation, people's perspectives on the internet, and like hypervigilance about like, am I going to be clipped out of context here? Yeah. And like, of course she has a lot of experience with that happening to her specifically. But going back to another thing you were saying, Michael, about like this form of media that Contrapoints is making being influenced by vlogs, as well as by theater, as well as by cinema, you know, that's kind of why I think this stuff is interesting and worth talking about on this podcast. Like, I'm not just presenting Contrapoints video essays and saying like, these are movies, because they're not, right? But they're also not really vlogs either. They're like something a little bit beyond that. And so like, I think it's worth looking at as like a new visual art form, because I think this is going beyond just like information delivery systems like the PBS videos and moving into like actual visual art. So like, I think it's like worth looking at as it's kind of happening, you know, like I think that the joke name we had was like Cahiers du YouTube, because, you know, one of the things that Cahiers du Cinema was doing was like kind of reassessing the state of Hollywood cinema as it was coming out, you know, like let's reinterpret, you know, Westerns as art and crime movies as art and things like that. And I think that is also a conversation worth having about the ambitious stuff that's happening on a site like YouTube.
Mm-hmm. I mean, also, like, you know, since that's the neat thing about her thing is, like, you know, she's grown and expanded, and as she's grown in popularity, you know, her budget has increased, so she's able to make longer videos. She's able to pour a lot, like, more money with costuming, with cinematography, with music, just with the whole, like, experience, the whole pizzazz, the, like, razzle dazzle, because she's got a platform, for better or for worse. Like, I don't know, the whole like concept of like having a platform is just interesting to me and horrifying. I don't know, I guess I've been thinking about that a lot since we watched Life of Brian too. We just got all these different people like who go stand on little pedestals and see how big of a crowd they can gather, and it's like exactly what YouTube is, or just like, I don't know. It's like everybody, a lot of people right now, like that. I feel like, especially kids. You know, I work with kids, and you know, we did career lessons in January, and like half of them want to be like YouTubers or video streamers, and everybody thinks that they can just speak out loud, and somebody's gonna go and listen to their whatever, their podcast about movies, and it's all friends, people who went to college together. I don't know, but like, I don't know. It's scary, but it's cool. Like, everybody wants this, but then do you?
Then what's different from Contrapoints and the kids who just want to be video streamers?
That was kind of what I was going to ask. Is like, she is the biggest like leftist video essayist, like bar none. And so I'm kind of wondering what y'all's perspective is on like, what about her channel? What about her like filmmaking style makes her stand out and like has led to such success?
I mean, I think there's historical factors, like the fact that like one, the understanding of YouTube as a place that had kind of like an ideological vacuum, that had, you know, there's real momentum building around particular issues with a particular right-wing perspective that, you know, she could jump into existing conversations, and that kind of builds in a sort of audience. I think too, like there is the, like I said, like the parasocial element of it. And also I don't want to call it drama, but there is like a personal stake in like, you know, a person who is like literally figuring out their gender identity, like, you know, on like in real time. And a lot of the older videos, like pre-transition, have been deleted, but I remember watching some of those as well. And there is something really compelling about that, that I think like is not necessarily tied to an ideological position either. That is also, you know, kind of weird. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird to comment on because it sounds a little bit exploitative in a way, but like I think it's undeniable that like the whole like I'm coming out as a YouTuber played a role in her audience building as well.
Well, she can be really smart, but nobody watches videos because she's really smart.
Well, but also like there's an element of
probably
entertaining.
that reason. No, I mean it's probably that.
I don't
reason.
think it's just that reason. I mean, I think she's really funny, or at least like has a particular sense of like extremely online sense of humor that like people are entertained by. I think that there's a thing in YouTube history. Where they started letting you choose the thumbnails that people would show on videos. Because before that, it used to be YouTube would pick the middle frame. It would be like the middle frame or a random frame. And I think that like she got really savvy about like doing really distinctive thumbnails that one like kind of foregrounded her persona, but two were like colorful and eye-catching in ways that like you look back at a lot of like YouTube thumbnails and like you have like impact font with like a guy yelling, right? That's like kind of like the genre of it. And again, like in the historical moment in which she came, she kind of started rising to prominence. She was able to kind of riff on that, in which there's still like a character, like a person that you're looking at with fonts, but was doing it in ways that were like eye-catching and different. And I mean, I think also, like I mentioned, like there's like very specific YouTube, seems silly to call them traditions, but like certain YouTube traditions that she was plugging into as well, where there's already an established audience that's interested in like educational YouTube. There's already an established audience that's interested in like debunker YouTube, right? There's already like an established format that's like vloggy. And there's people even that are within the like, or adjacent to a lot of these people would do, like John Green and those Hank Green and stuff are not, they're just like a couple degrees of separation in terms of interpersonal relationships with like a lot of these people who would become like the leftist YouTubers. And those people had a lot of like influence and clout as far as like establishing like the early YouTube format of like audience interaction and stuff like that. And in addition to like having their hands in like the educational YouTube. And I think that like Contrapoints was again able to like participate in these existing things while also doing something that was new enough that it was able to attract attention above like the like, the voices. And also like, I mean, back in like 2015, YouTube was a smaller place. It wasn't small at the time, but it was smaller than it currently is. And so I think like undeniably, if you talk to a lot of these people who've been around long enough, like they will say that popularity is more difficult to have now because there's like there becomes a calcifying effect of when there are more people, those who are in early and have an audience early are able to kind of snowball that, while you have a lot of secondary and more minor creators who may also be doing interesting stuff, but by virtue of them trying to jump in 2019 or something like that are simply just not going to be able to immediately get the sort of audience that some of these older ones do. And so I think that like, as with film, like as with any existing medium, there's like a confluence of historical and market factors, as well as like just genuinely interesting and new ideas that aren't too alienating to people who are interested in established formats. And all of those kind of come together to create like, a popular work. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on any of that.
No, I think all that stuff makes sense. I think that there's always going to be kind of like material conditions, so to speak, that would kind of influence somebody's popularity on a platform like YouTube. But I also think like just looking at it in a vacuum, like she's really good at what she does. Like she's really funny for one thing, and funny not only in her writing, but also in like the filmmaking technique she uses. Like she can get laughs out of reaction shots and like slow zooms and visual effects she puts over the characters. I think that also like I can't think of anybody who like goes as far as she does in terms of like the production design and the costume design and the lighting, and like her videos are a whole production that takes like months to produce. Then I think like the seriousness that she brings to the craft of making a YouTube video that like makes it a whole experience for the viewer, the kind of experience that make us want to like
sit down in an evening and turn all the lights off and like have that be our entertainment for the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Like there aren't many YouTubers that like are kind of bringing that level of verve to like what they do. But I don't know, Jessy,
maybe it's just maybe it's just that we're big fans. I don't know. Like I think we regularly you and I will like make jokes referencing things that she says. I'm like can't remember it.
There's a lot of like running jokes, and like she will cut back to earlier videos and like bring in old characters and things like that. So that kind of goes back to what Michael was saying about YouTube being more of a dialogue than a monologue, an ongoing process than like here is the product.
I also just think like what if what she set out to do was try to break down like, you know, political concepts for people who are on the fence or people who want to understand the nuances of you know, different things and different viewpoints. I think she does such a great job of, like I said, you know, showing different sides and kind of giving both straw man but also like very valid portrayals of the thought processes on both sides. And it's helped me understand things a lot better over the last few years, especially, you know, in the rise of the Trump era and how I feel like that's really changed our culture in America. I feel like
I do think that's like a super important historical thing too, is that like like a lot of these channels got like a huge boost in audience because of Trump, right? You know, because it was Gamergate, you know, was an extremely online thing that like, you know, a lot of people paid attention to, but not a lot of people who weren't already like into video games and stuff like that. But the Donald Trump and like Unite the Right rally and like a lot of those things, I think forced people to go to like, let's say Google and just like Google, like, you know, what are incels?
Well, like,
what are whatever.
I found out about Contrapoints because I got recommended like on the sidebar on YouTube her video, How to Identify a Fascist, which is now like the first video on her YouTube channel because she's deleted all of her older stuff. And like, I think that you're right. Like myself, and I think a lot of people kind of saw politics as like what it really is like throughout the Trump years and like kind of became radicalized by that. And also like there were a lot of people like Contrapoints and other people we're going to talk about who were kind of more inspired to put out kind of agitprop in the other direction online to try to pull people that direction. And we'll talk about this more next week as well. We're going to look at a couple of videos about anti-fascism, which is like a particular interest of this YouTube ecosystem. And like the big like kind of crown jewel in that set of videos is like Sean's video about Charlottesville. It's like an hour long. Like, let's look at all these live streams of people who attended the Charlottesville rally and kind of piece together a narrative of it.
I will say, like, hilariously, like, if the inauguration of Donald Trump and like a lot of the fascist like energy that was going on nationally at the time was a like unifying and like energizing moment for YouTube leftists. Hilariously, in a mimic of like, I guess, like actual national conversations around leftism, as the Trump administration's first term wanes, you see that fracturing because of infighting and stuff as well, which, you know, is like, again, like I think makes a good case for this being kind of like a product of a particular like historical moment as well, because it mimics like the dynamics of this ecosystem mimic a lot of the dynamics of like just broader like American politics to the left of center in ways that are kind of interesting. Again, like I find sometimes kind of frustrating that it's like, you know, I kind of wish this weren't also happening on YouTube.
Yeah.
Zach, so Zach is thumbs down.
I didn't say that.
You have said that without saying it. Were there any redeeming values of this to you at all?
I don't know. I worked 11 hours today. I'm tired. I work in news. I listen to people's opinions all day. So it was just more opinions. And I just, like, this, good for her. She's got 2 million subscribers. The fuck does she need my subscribe for? It's fine. she gets to do her thing, I get to do my thing, and we all get to live a day. That's how I feel.
Hopefully.
I think if you like exploring political concepts, and also, you know, you like pizzazz, you like theatrics, or maybe you're interested in queer theory too. I think that she's a great channel, and a public figure who I just think is very interesting, but also just sad. Like I kind of worry for her. That show.
If you subscribed and started commenting, maybe she'd also punch up Stallion for you.
Oh man, I wish. Anyway.
No, she's not. I mean, she can do all she wants. She's not going to beat the shock of that video. This is fantastic. It's a great video. If my closing thought is go to YouTube and go to the search bar and type in "Mayor kills Stallion with one kick," and then watch the first video. It's really funny because
is that not a Blazing Saddles gag?
He just has like this drooping dick, and he's like all ready to like to impregnate this mayor, and then she just kicks him, and he just dies. It's something.
I think Natalie Wynn would be into it.
She would.
Yeah. I think anybody should be into it. It's a great video. It's quality. There's another one about these people, and they're zip lining, and then there's a sloth on the zip line, and they just get stopped by the sloth, and the sloth goes like, "The fuck." Yeah,
that also sounds good.
It's great. It's great. It's good stuff. All right. Any other closing thoughts on Contrapoints?
One other thing that I kind of forgot to say earlier when Michael was comparing this genre of video essay to like the documentaries of Michael Moore, is that I think there is a certain genre of like informational documentary that has just been completely outclassed by YouTube in the last couple of years. Like when the rigorousness of like the research and the complexity of the information that's conveyed to the audience, I think is like so far beyond what I get in a traditional kind of talking head documentary in various YouTube videos. And that goes for some of the later Contrapoints videos like Incels and Gender Critical, which were on our playlist today. But it also goes for other things we're going to talk about in later weeks. So we can keep kind of talking about like how this differs from traditional documentaries as we keep going.
Well, I think also the format and the flexibility of YouTube, because these are much shorter production time. As much as a Contrapoints video is a production, it is much shorter than a production of even a fairly modest documentary in like a traditional terms. And so I think that format allows it to be a lot more insightful about the phenomena of the internet.
Which moves so much faster.
Which moves so much faster and is just like kind of requires you to be immersed in it in a way that it might be hard for like whoever that dude is who makes like the documentaries, is Alex Gibney or something like that. Like it would be hard for him to just come in, research, make his documentary and leave, right? It's like the internet is a place that you live, and these documentaries, quote unquote YouTube documentaries, are a product of people who are familiar with that world and can research within that world without having to be like coming from the outside in as much.
Jess, anything from you?
I don't know. Other than I just think she's a lot of fun. And I think that you, listener, should check her out. Hopefully it's something that you can enjoy and engage with. Just buckle up because they're longer. I mean, not all of them are long though. Some of them I think are like 15, 20 minutes.
Also, one thing that YouTube does is you can speed up the videos, which I do. I watch all my YouTube videos at 2x speed.
Wow.
And that is a great time saver. And also I've gotten to where if I try to watch them at normal speed, it's agonizingly slow. So you can join the dark
I
side.
think Contra's videos are so fast paced already, though.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely just like treat it as a podcast and listen to it while you're doing something else.
I wouldn't recommend
I think you
doing
miss.
that for
I think you miss out so much, like on just like some of the humor with like the costuming and the facial things that she does. But you can. I don't know. I just think it's been really helpful for me understanding things. Like I said, as our culture has changed and I've become definitely more political in the last few years, and I would attribute a lot of that to her and to how she's helped me better understand a lot. So, yeah, that's what I have to think about it.
Cool. All right. Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. If you want to watch the 5 videos that we watched for this episode for Contrapoints, it's linked at cinematary.com, so you can find it there. Or if you're listening on a podcast app, it's in the description. Same with the YouTube in the description. Right. But that's our show. If you'd like to follow us, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/cinematary, on Twitter and Instagram at handle @cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/cinematary, where we list all the movies that we talked about in this episode. If you'd like to support the show, whether it's $1 or $5, head over to patreon.com/cinematary. Thank you so much to our patrons: Cam, Chad Newsom, Corey Willingham, Harry Eskin, Candace Sisson, Ron Hayes, Teresa Marsati, Titus Arthur, Tyler Chandler, and Whitney Rio Ross. Thank you so much for your patronage. What do we got next week, Andrew?
So next week we're doing 3 videos about anti-fascism. 2 of them are shorter. One is called Steve Bannon from the channel Philosophy Tube, run by Abigail Thorne. Another is titled Always a Bigger Fish, which is part of a series called The Alt-Right Playbook by a guy named Ian Danskin. But then the big one is called Charlottesville. I think it's called the True Alt-Right by the YouTuber Sean. And I actually wrote an essay about that video that got published on a site that wasn't Cinematary, that we may link in the description to next week's video. And you find it with a Google if you wish as well. But yeah, that'll be next week.
Cool stuff. All right. Until then, thanks
Stay
guys for listening.